Good evening, good evening. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the hit show Cultivating the Culture. Obviously, I'm not your regular host, which is normally Tariq Jamil Ibn Jamil Lang, but I'm your guest host, Muhammad Bashir. Those of you who are familiar with Cultivating the Culture, you know that this is a very exciting and a very dynamic program that allows discussion on various topics that relate to building culture and building faith within the community. As always, we start the show with the immortal, unforgettable words of the late, great El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, Malcolm X. May Allah be pleased with him and grant him paradise. Um, just so that you can all never forget, that you'll always remember Malcolm.
Nowadays to learn how to do is see for yourself and listen for yourself and think for yourself, and then you can come to an intelligent decision for yourself. But if you form the habit of going by what you hear others say about someone, or going by what others think about someone, instead of going and searching that thing out for yourself, and seeing for yourself, you will be walking west when you think you're going east. You'll be walking east when you think you're going west. So this generation, especially of our people, have a burden upon themselves more so than at any other time in history. The most important thing we can learn how to do today is think for
Cultivating
ourselves.
culture. For those
Good
of
to
you
keep
who
wide open the ears
don't know,
and what everybody else has
this
to
is
say.
a call-in
When
show.
you
You
come
call
to make
in
a
and talk
decision,
and
you
do
have
whatever
to
it is
weigh
that you
all
like,
what you heard
offer your own
on
opinions.
its own and place it where it belongs, and then come to a decision for yourself, and you'll never regret it. But if you form the habit of taking what someone else says about a thing without checking it out for yourself, you'll find that other people will have you hating your own friends and loving their enemies.
Welcome back. This is Cultivating the Culture. I'm your guest host, Muhammad Bashir. Uh, the topic for this evening, as it is with here, is a very provocative topic, and it's one of those topics that has been in the news recently. And the issue really is reparations. Reparations in the black community has been discussed as far back as 40 Acres and a Mule, as far back as the Freedmen's Bank. How do you repair the damage that was done to the black community, to black people, to descendants of Africa, the descendants of the prisoners of war who are commonly referred to as slaves or enslaved? How do you repair the damage done to this particular community? Uh, Again, I reference you a little bit of history on it. The first attempt at what commonly referred to as reparations was offered in the late 1800s during Reconstruction following the Civil War. You may recall that Abraham Lincoln, the president then of the United States, was pushed into a corner. He was losing the war, that is, the Union and the war, to the South. One of the reasons why he was losing is because the South had its own built-in labor force, so they were continuing to make money as they were continuing to prosecute the war on their behalf. They had what they commonly refer to as slaves. The North didn't have a lot of that, so you're talking about people literally leaving their homes and their jobs to go fight this particular war, and so therefore there was no real income to sustain that particular effort. So they were literally fighting away from home and then still trying to figure out how do I manage home, a problem the South didn't have because of their free labor force. Frederick Douglass, Harriet Tubman, people along that line pushed Abraham Lincoln to the point to where he had to make a move in order to save the Union. And part of that move was he issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing all those who were enslaved in the states that were at war with the Union. Didn't free all the slaves, as sometimes when you hear it in the media, it makes it sound like he freed all the slaves. He freed the slaves that were in the states that were at war with the Union. This is why you call Maryland the Free State, because they were not at war with the Union, and so therefore they were still allowed to keep their slaves. with that, these newly emancipated slaves who were part and parcel of the South Carolinas and the Virginias and the Georgias began to migrate north and join the Union Army. And it was that influx of black soldiers and black willingness to fight as a way of being able to show that this was their mantra, if we are able to show that we're willing to fight and die for this country, then we'll be respected when we come out of this particular fight as men and be given the rights of citizens and of men. Frankly, that has been a mantra that has been used from the Civil War on, even through the most recent incursions of the United States. But the real interesting part about that was they helped turn the tide of the war in favor of the Union, and the Union wound up crushing the Confederacy, the southern states. The payback of that was what commonly referred to as the Civil Rights Amendments. 13th Amendment, abolishing slavery, obviously with the exception of the commission of a crime. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution, meaning that everybody, anyone born on the continental soil of the United States is a citizen according to that, and that they're entitled to equal protection of all of the laws within that, and that no state can do anything to abridge those particular laws. So we therefore have that as a backdrop. The 15th Amendment, then the right to vote. So that's how you get your civil rights movement. At that point, they recognize that free people are only as free as their ability to economically support themselves. All right? And therein, that's when you created the concept of 40 acres and a mule. That is, they would take the land that was seized from the South, was turned over to the former people who used to plow those fields for free, turned over to them as part and parcel of their payback, of their reparations to be able to repair. It lasted for maybe less than a year before it was seized back by the Southerners as a way of paying their way back in, bought their way back into the United States, for lack of a better way to put it. And okay, are we still live? Okay, so they bought their way back into the Union that way, but they bought their way back in on the backs of both sides, selling out the dream of 40 acres and a mule to black people. So, with that backdrop, there have been other issues of reparations that have been offered into the culture, and one of the things that we decided to do tonight was to give you the real heavy hitters. So not just are you dealing with cultivating the culture, you have as a guest here tonight the one and only Sharif Shafi of the program. He has his own program here on WBGR called Freedom Fighters of the DMV, and he's going to be switching seats. He's going to be in the seat of the interviewee as opposed to the seat of the interviewer. So everyone, Assalamu alaikum, first of all, to Sharif, and welcome to the show. And you understand that I couldn't think of a person I would much rather discuss reparations with than you. I've been, by the way, checking out your podcast, and you're just really killing the game. So if the people aren't ready to be woke up, let's wake them up a little bit tonight on the issues of reparations.
Oh, yes, sir. First of all, I want to say hello to my ancestors, and thank you for having me. As you can see, I have a shirt that says "Never trust your ancestors' enemy." All right, so that's to let you know right off the bat. Like, reparation is it's a wheelhouse for me, just like police brutality. I have a plethora of information, resources concerning reparations. The last couple of weeks, we've been having like a lot of these things where the archdiocese, the Jesuit school, Catholic Jesuit, has pledged $100 million in reparations because of their interaction with slavery. You got Brown University, you got Yale, you got Princeton, you got a lot of. In fact, there was an article in News Hip Hop which used my images to give Princeton Bible School, to give them $28 million in reparations. So this has been a major concern of mine because so many people have been involved in slavery, and now there's time for some kind of repair. And most people think reparation is money. You know, reparations has a lot to do with money, but it's many different entities, and I got them documented, but most people don't talk about those.
Right, and one of the real interesting things about reparations is the people who argue against it are always, I mean, it's kind of like referencing that old Dave Chappelle skit where everybody's getting a check and they're rushing off to the liquor store, they're walking off to buy some cigarettes, and that's the mentality that, oh, black people don't get paid and they can go out and buy a Cadillac, and that's the only concept that people who are against reparations use as a way of saying, I'm anti-reparations because all you're doing is paying off, and it's you're just giving off check money on top of money for no good reason, and nobody's going to do anything with it other than go out and buy trinkets.
Right.
Explain some of the other aspects of reparations that people seem to miss, especially those who are critics of reparations.
Well, the first thing the Europeans, Anglo-Saxon whites always say, well, my ancestors didn't have anything to do with it, or where are you going to get the money from? Those two things come in almost simultaneously.
Right.
And to let you know that you do have something to do with it because you're the beneficiary of what your ancestors have done. You know, you got all the white schools, you got all the white hospitals, you got all the white banks, you got everything that, and you get to change the rules just like we see right now with the Voting Rights Act. Every 25 years, they got to vote on this thing to make sure that black folks is able to vote. They're changing the voting boxes. But reparations is the same thing. They use this to scare people, scare white folks like, oh, they're gonna make you pay for slavery. Well, you should, because you're the beneficiary of it. This whole country is the beneficiary of it. Explain
that. Let's peel that back a little bit. When you say the beneficiary of it, break it down. Maybe pick a particular part of the beneficiary and explain how it is it transfers from the destruction that was heaped on with the beginning of slavery till how it translates to somebody being a beneficiary now.
Okay, prime example. Aunt Jemima, right? Aunt Jemima Syrup Company. It was a black woman working inside of a lawyer's home, and she was the cook for that family, right? She was the cook. She was getting pennies on a dollar, right? And he went to his office bragging about this woman who make flapjacks. The company, Aunt Jemima Syrup Company, or whoever the hell they are, they got this woman to come in. They make some flapjacks. They liked them. They start selling her brand, and she got pennies on the dollar. The company itself was a billionaire industry, a Fortune 500 company. His grandchildren will reap that benefit from those coins.
Right.
Her family, living in Newark, New Jersey, is broke. They couldn't even buy a headstone for this woman. That's what I mean about beneficiary. Brown University, we got 56 universities right now that's documented that was built by slaves. And black folks was not allowed to go to those schools. We got the justice system. The building that the Supreme Court justices sat in was built by slaves. The Capitol building was built by slaves. The White House was built by slaves. But we are never, ever the beneficiary of any of our ancestors' work or findings. The stoplight, which was founded by the engineer, the train engine itself was founded by a black man. You know, many things in America that we have contributed. The cotton gin was founded in blueprint by a black man.
That's right.
But we're never ever the beneficiary. You know, these are things that people, generational wealth, it trickled down. These people never ever loses money.
Right. And that's
always coming in.
And that's the nature of the conversation. That's what the nature of the repair is. That black people are always trying to find ways to generate wealth while other people have already had an advanced head start on wealth because the wealth is generational, but it was generational because of the damage that was done to the black community.
Right. So, for example, like cotton, right? We're going to just use one or two products, cotton and corn. Well, let's say cotton, sugar, and tobacco, right? We know who worked those fields, right? Cotton was king. You go to the museum, it talks about it, right? Cotton was king. That shirt you have on, this shirt I have on is made out of cotton, right? So they've been using cotton forever. Even in Africa right now, they're using cotton as a cash crop, where they're forcing black folks to work in these fields.
Right.
Now, the way to pay for reparations, every material that is sold on the borders or come in through the borders of America that has cotton in it, you tax that 2 to 3% towards reparations. I don't care where it comes from. Right? You tax that. Then you take sugar. Every candy bar, every sweet treat that we have in America or going out of America get taxed 2 to 3%.
Because the industry was built on the back of slave labor, and somebody else reaped the benefit, but the person who actually did the work or who created the mechanism to be able to harvest it better, etc., never received any payment for that work, and his family suffered by virtue of it.
Right, and we're still suffering. Now, education. Education, we know that schools, Virginia, for example, Virginia got 5 schools that was built by slave hands, by our ancestors' hand. Longwood, VMI, Virginia University, William and Mary, at Virginia University. There's one more school there. There's 5 of them that was, we know for a fact, that was built by slaves. Right? That's free education for any descendant. Now we got to, another thing that we got to clear up.
When you say, excuse me for cutting you off, but you say free education, you're talking about free education as a reparation.
As part of reparation.
As part of it, okay, absolutely.
Now that's why I said, like, reparation comes in many forms, but we still must also attach ourselves to the corn, to the finance. You know, for us not to attach ourselves to finance, we'll be totally, sadly, doing ourselves a disservice for our ancestors, because this country was built on labor.
Right.
And you know, labor is one of the top industries in this country, if not the top, because that's what makes this country moves.
Right.
Right? So we have to understand how to maneuver this conversation in Congress. We can't have a Herschel Walker. We can have a Herschel Walker come and talk for the people on reparations. We can have a Dr. Claude Anderson, who's a scholar in economics. You know, we can have somebody like that, but we cannot have these I hate to say it, I play football, brain dead individuals come and have a conversation on reparations, especially when you're not advocating for the people. You know, he grew up in Georgia. Right now we're having a major sticker, a major problem in Georgia over voting.
Right.
This all has something to do with reparations.
Yeah. So you discussed that potential, what the argument, for lack of a better way to put it, or the specious argument that Europeans or ancestors of white wealth may make. You're talking about Herschel Walker. What's the argument that ancestors of slaves make? Anti-reparation.
Well,
like Herschel.
But we have a lot of black folks believe, and understand this. Black folks is doing this because of they're rejecting reparations because they want to fit in, right? And we have been censored. Black folks have censored themselves to fit in with the Caucasian white folks. And more you speak towards their liking, more likely you are a plus sign for them. They will pitch you up. Charles Barkley, for example. We need for you to go and speak in front of this crowd here, right? So you got black folks that would say, "Hey, I don't need reparations. Why do you think the churches never talk about reparations? Because they're getting something. The pastor himself is getting something. He controls the congregation. He controls the education and the know-how. Why do you think we have 100, 200,000 churches here in America? Christian churches. Why do you think those churches not advocating for something to make their congregation financially wealthy? Because somebody have told them that's not good for your church. That's not good for you.
So when you use the term to fit in, you're talking about not wanting to offend white sensibilities.
Right.
Because white people are cutting the check, white people are in control, and to stay in that lane where you feel like I can stay important, I'll represent the interest that might be adverse to my community as opposed to the interest that would bring my community up, because my community may see the world differently than I see it. They don't care about offending. You don't care about offending white sensibilities. All what you want is, as King would say, back in the day, right before the March on Washington, we're coming to get our check.
Right.
You know, so somebody is supposed to pay to repair the damage that was done to us, considering all the advantages they gave Europeans when they came here.
You know, once King made that statement, his life was short.
Yeah.
As long as he stayed on the path of Europeans and Anglo-Saxon, he was good. And once he made the statement over a couple times about the Vietnam War, about reparations, you know, and he also talked about the land-grant colleges.
That's right.
Many land-grant colleges was slighted wealth, huge bundles of wealth.
That's right.
To educate white society. All along, we were working on the plantation fields right beside those universities, building the bricks to make those universities great. And so once King made that statement, his life was snuffed out. And that because European whites said, look, you're no longer needed, so we're going to have to get rid of you. And this is across the board. I don't put anything past my ancestors' enemies. You know, prime example. South Carolina was Joe Biden everything. Right?
That's right. In fact, he had lost all the primaries until he got to South Carolina, and Clyburn endorsed him, and boom, he took off. He didn't lose anything after that, including the presidency.
Right.
Yeah.
And you would think if Clyburn can offer you South Carolina, not worrying about Georgia right now,
right?
South Carolina, what you think Clyburn should ask for his people?
Right. Right.
Well, Clyburn asked for what he normally asks for. Cooning. He said, we would like to have a black national anthem. How's a black national anthem going to feed, educate, inspire our people? Why didn't you ask for him to sign by executive order reparations? We don't even really need to study, but you can sign a reparations study where we can have institutions all over the world study everything about slavery and bring them documents back to America so that we can correct this injury.
Considering that H.R. 40 is back on the table, it's been on the table since 1988 when John Conyers introduced it into Congress, and that was to study the damage of slavery. Bill Clinton came out, I think maybe a year, something, probably around that same year, a year after, and issued a formal apology for slavery and etc. But there hasn't been any movement toward that since 1988, toward the reconciliation. Now, we know we have Gerald Horns, we have Amos Wilsons, we have historians, we have psychologists, we have all of these people who have studied this particular issue ad nauseum and can present a proper understanding for anyone to be able to say this issue here has been dissected and here's the proofs. What is missing from that we need to go back and restudy or for my thought process, reinvent the wheel? Do we really need an HR 40 that sends us back to studying the problem, or are we at the stage now to where we can, as a community, demand that the problem has been studied, call on Gerald Horn, call on your historians, and call on white historians and black historians have all written about the damage that was done by virtue of slavery and the immediate aftermath of slavery, that is the mentality of white supremacy that destroyed black communities, the redlining when black communities came up, the land-grant colleges and things like that, that denied black people the same opportunity that it gave whites, the gentrification, the ushering black people into certain communities and blocking them off with highways. All of that is part and consistent with the discrimination and the racism that black people have suffered by virtue of the fact that nobody has let go of the slave narrative that they are, that as the Dred Scott decision said, that a black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. Are we at that point yet to where the demand now is there? That instead of studying the problem, now is the time to step forward and say, this is the demand, here's the proofs.
Well, we're at that point. We've been at that point for a minute. When Honorable John Conyers brought the bill forward, we were at that point. I was woke. I was woke. And America is not at that point. White, Caucasian, Anglo-Saxon, European, white folks is not at that point. I was listening to a documentary, a speech today, where a white man was saying that Africa, we must keep Africa as a resource center. It's a resource center for every European nation. And then he said, if we allow Africa to exert its power, every European country, including America, will fall off the shelf and they will become a impoverished country. And I look at the same thing here in this country. If white folks allow black folks to, notice I said allow black folks to exert their energies towards our cause, America will become a better place. But white folks will feel inferior, and they already feel that, and then that will lead to other problems in this country, which I don't call my country, it's their country, because we have no control over none of the documentation and historic stuff in this country.
You have at least 3 examples in history of reparations. Are they separate and apart from the analysis you just gave? That is that the difference between how you treat a black man is because of the fear of black men dominating, as opposed to your Jewish community in 1943, your Japanese community in 1990, your Native American community, I think it was in 1988 or something to that effect, who received reparations on some level. And now the Jewish community actually received theirs from West Germany.
No, they received money from here too.
Okay, very good. And but that's the issue. Is it the issue that all of them fit within a particular paradigm that doesn't allow them to take power away? Is that why reparations has not been on the table for the black community?
Well, see, Europeans can identify with, and they have made deals with, the Native Americans. They told the Native Americans, as long as you don't include the black Indian, the black Native, the black African, we're going to continue to keep our part with the treaty. 1866, 1860, something like that. We're gonna keep our promise with you, but you cannot. You go and do your DNA study, right? I know without a shadow of a doubt, my grandparents, my grandmom, they're native people, and African. So, but when I did my DNA, not one bit of native popped up. But they said that we got to have 25%. How do you know what 25% of my blood is? You know what I'm saying? Why is it always got to be a percentage? Why can't I just be? Why I got to be 3/5 of a man? But this is the same thing with America. Have a tendency to bog us down with foolishness. Just like with this voting thing, it's foolishness. You know, if voting was a right, then why are you changing it? Why are you changing the boxes? You know, and the same thing like with reparation. If you were planning on giving us reparation, you would have gave it to us already. And so we have made some effort, some step. We had the first time in the history of this country, which I was there at the hearing at the Rayburn Building on Capitol Hill, where we had the Judicial Committee, and we spoke to Sheila Jackson Lee, who was the chairperson, but we spoke to the head individual, who was Steve Cohen, white man, Jewish, and we was explaining reparation. They had 4 people on the panel, and one of those persons was a football player. This was in 2019, and he made the same statement that Herschel Walker made. Oh, I pulled myself up. My father and my mother told me, don't ever go and do the black power. Don't ever fight for your people. Fight for yourself. You know, and so we have been taught to fight an entire system as individually. The Jewish has fought the system collectively. The Native Americans have fought the system collectively. The Japanese have fought the system collectively. We, as a people, has never, ever fought the system collectively. We fought them in small groups. You know, the Civil Rights Movement was a small group. Because then you had the Malcolm, you had some other SNCC, and all them other groups. They were small groups. And only ones that seemed more sympathetic to European was one to get the hitch. It was the one to get the, okay, we're gonna have you at the White House, we're gonna have you at this meeting, we're gonna have you in front of the camera. How many times you seen Johnson or Kennedy have a picture with Malcolm?
The phone number here, if you want to call in, is 301-429-9247. That's 301-429-9247. Would love to hear what you have to say about that. Let's go to recently Evansville, Illinois. Evansville, Illinois just had alderman, young black woman, demanded that they investigate. She was shrewd with hers. I want to investigate housing discrimination from 1919 till 1968. And what they did was they determined that even where they had passed a law in Evansville, Illinois, they had still used racial profiling, redlining, all these things to violate their own law. And she was able to convince the council that this is one of the problems that you have with your severe wealth gap, where white wealth, as you talked about earlier, which is transferred generation to generation, is 10 times that of black wealth. And therefore, you are seeing these economic gaps in the community, and thus, because of the continuation of the discrimination, you have these extraordinary wealth gaps, etc. So they voted on reparations because they could establish in housing, only housing alone, and that was the issue. So they use a 3% tax on their marijuana sales, since marijuana is legal, to put up a $10 million over 10-year fund for those people who could demonstrate that they were, or their family was, discriminated between 1919 and today. What do you think about a proposal like that?
Well, you know, Asheville, North Carolina, they're doing the same thing, and that's the way to go. You know, you must take your local government, your state government, and you must turn them into huge pawns, huge chess pieces to fight against the federal government by having state file against, you know, entities that is ran by the federal government, and then you win, right? You have these strong willpower women and some men to take on this fight. And Illinois is a prime example. Asheville, North Carolina is a prime example. We can do this at a local level and force the federal government, and that's how it should be done. Because it wasn't just the feds that was beneficiary. Right. It was the states. It was the counties. It was little, municipalities that benefited from slavery. I think Maryland, PG County, was founded in 1696. What do you think was going on here in 1696? Right. That's just in PG County.
Yeah.
So you can go and you can find like the Bowie plantation, the Hyattsville plantation. These are mansions. The Bladensburg mansion. Those was plantations. Why shouldn't we have an investigation? Why wouldn't we have that collective investigation? You go down to Louisiana, they got plantations all over the place. Right. And then they're doing weddings, they're doing this and they're doing that, and I gotta pay to go and see where my ancestors was murdered at.
Yeah, almost every insurance company here in America, the Hartford, the whatever
Travelers,
it is, all
every one of them
originated
ING.
by getting insurance on slave ships that brought slaves in. So they benefited when the slaves got here because they didn't have to pay out a big fine or whatever, just like with your car or when you're, the little copay that you have. They had the same kind of a deal, and they made their money on the back of that. Every banking institution, almost every banking institution, even though they constantly keep flipping the names every time the feds investigate one, they flip the name and change it to something else.
Wachovia,
there you go.
Wells Fargo.
There you go. That's
There's many others.
Yeah, and all of them were built on the back of the idea that there was the lucrativeness of slaves and slave labor.
Wall Street.
Yeah, absolutely. Wall Street in and of itself was built on. In fact, Wall Street was, in fact, a slave
holding pen.
Holding pen. So it's really intriguing that when you begin to connect the past with the present, how much resistance we get from it. I'm wondering if this issue of reparations and the nature of white supremacy and the fear that you express of them seeing what Black power would really look like is going to be a permanent impediment to reparations in and of itself. Well, at least on a federal level, on the state and the city, local level, I see what they're attempting to do, because theirs is strictly economic, try to raise the wealth gap and then eliminate the potential for a oversaturation of Black power. If you can just try to balance it out a little bit, then you can calm the natives down.
Well, this is the thing. The Europeans know that they have a recessive gene. That's the first thing, right? Now, you're looking at a lot of their children. That I got sons from 36 down to 19. And these young men interact with all different types of people, right? I got biracial grandchildren, right? So they have already infiltrated the European community. We are deeply inside of the enemy territory. And now Donald Trump blew the trumpet to say, look, and I'm not blaming Donald, because this was before. I prefer having Donald because he's right out front. I can deal with him. I know what Joe Biden is. He's a crook. He locked up a lot of people. And so Donald Trump blew the trump. He blew the trumpet and said, look, if we don't change this, we're going to lose this. And the insurrection wasn't accidental. Every law enforcement government agency was collectively involved in it, including the White House and the Capitol building. Mm-hmm. We know that there was breaches within the Capitol building for people to come in there. We know this for a fact. Mm-hmm. I got people on record. Mm-hmm. So now we're talking about the good old boys is dying off. Mm-hmm. Their sons and daughters are leaving the farm right now. Mm-hmm. there are gentrifying communities like this. And they think that these communities, see, we struggled in these communities, but we made it work for us, right? They can't struggle. They can't afford struggle.
Right.
You see, they can't afford any type of struggle because at that point they become agitated. And I'm not saying all white folks,
Right.
but
Right.
enough of them.
Right.
We just had two.
Enough of those with the privilege that says I shouldn't have to struggle.
Right. We just had 2 mass shootings.
Right.
And this on the heels of the insurrection. We had somebody planning a bomb to really set it off at the Capitol building. White folks know the ending is in sight for their overall power. You had a shufflefoot black man for the president. You have a vice president now that is black, but she considered herself Asiatic. So
let me interrupt you for a second. Here we have a call on line 1. This is Cultivating the Culture. Who am I speaking with?
This is, I've been waiting on my reparations. What do you think of the Catholic order pledging 100 million? It's to atone for slave labor and their selling of slaves.
Well, I'm going to let our guest answer that for you. I thank you for the call. What's your name? And where are you calling from?
Angela.
Angela? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, Angela. I'm going to let him take the answer to that. Can you take it on the air or off the air? I mean, off the phone. All right? Or do you want to follow up? Well, let him answer, and if you have a follow-up, you can do that, okay?
Well, I think it's a small gesture in 2021. You know, they knew this information a long time ago. They knew that they had a long history of slavery. And, you know, it's like if I'm able to just give you what I want to give you, can you imagine how much I really owe? Can you imagine how much I really got? Just to come out and just say I got 100 million right off the break, I believe that you can throw out a couple trillion. And so I don't put anything past my ancestor enemy, and but it's a good suggestion. It's a good gesture. I just believe that more need to come from all entities that had anything to do with slavery.
The idea that the Catholic Church, under the Holy Roman Empire and under the Catholic Church, was the one who sanctioned the slave ships and gave them the cross and all that, and sent them out into the world to conquer the world. And so it's like kind of like the mafia boss saying, go out and take care of this, and the guy goes to do it. It comes back to the owner.
Right.
And so what they're doing, in my opinion, is recognizing the owner, but they're also recognizing what I think is something that you indicated earlier. The potential power of Africa having the impact on everything. So you pay these reparations, perhaps you can balance out that particular thought process that when and if this African mindset, or they begin to claim their own resources, or they begin to claim a position in the world as strong, viable leadership, as the most lucrative continent, the place where all the minerals are, all the resources are. When they begin to claim those things, you can say, hey, I was a friend to you, and therefore,
right.
You know, I mean, that's what missionary was all about, you
right.
know. And the other thing that you said was, can you imagine how much they're making? It's kind of like NBA basketball players.
Right.
They're making $40 million a year. And I always ask people, can you imagine if you can pay LeBron $40 million a year, how much the owners must really be making?
Right.
You know, and that's the same kind of narrative on that. Thank you for your call, Angela. Do you have a follow-up?
The follow-up would be there are quite a few institutions, Harvard's doing it. There's a newspaper in Missouri who's doing the same thing, collecting money to pay. Mm-hmm. And I'm just wondering, what's behind that? I thought they weren't the ones who enslaved brown people, so why should they pay?
Mm-hmm. That's the argument that they make. So the question then becomes, what exactly is it that they're paying reparations toward?
Right. And how are you going to pay them?
You saw that in Evansville with they used housing as being the issue for reparations. They didn't use criminal justice. They didn't use economic exploitation. They didn't use any of. They used housing because they could demonstrate that, and therefore, I think, even though I think it's a good gesture, it might be a gesture that one of those kind of things where you appease the people with something so that they don't ask for everything that they're entitled to. So that's what my thought of it. Thank you. We're moving on to the next call. Thank you, Angela. What do you think about that as a discussion? Because again, she made an interesting point. There's a discussion out there as it relates to reparations for potential tax abatement, meaning that you can establish that you can establish through slavery or through discrimination that's a result from the same line or chain of the destructiveness of white supremacy on black bodies by the government, federal, state, or local. You should be tax exempt, at least for a period of time. Right. You know, with the Jews, they are given a stipend for life.
Right.
You know, with the
Alaskans.
Yeah, that's right. You know,
Alaskan Eskimo, they got a stipend for life.
Stipend for life, that kind of thing. So something to ease, or at least to fend off the hole that we dug for you. Mm-hmm. Something like that. So you got the issue of tax abatement out there, no taxes. You got the issue of we built this school, as you indicated earlier, then the people who built this school should have access to this school. So you're talking about free tuitions and things along that line. Right. Before we get too late, what do you think about the idea that within the stimulus, some people are calling that reparation, considering that I think they set aside a certain amount of money for black farmers to try to rehab black farming?
But that's an insult, first of all. That's an insult because black farmers, you're going to give me something in a so-called in a pandemic, which you're giving to everybody. Mm-hmm. White farmers got it last time, did he not?
That's
and
right.
They had 2-point-some trillion. He got 1.9 trillion, so he got a short end of the deal. And plus, white farmers are going to get some of this money too. Mm-hmm. So let's don't, because I went and looked on the roll, they had every kind of farming, chicken farming, egg farming, every ducks, you name it. Mm-hmm. Every kind of farming. And these people are going to benefit from that money too. So for you saying, not you, but for they saying that, especially the woman from Georgia, saying that black farmers going to run up the debt and all this stuff, that's hocus pocus. That's more of fear mongering, exciting a riot, because what happens? Some white guy down the block, man, because this black guy may have got something that he might not even gotten.
Right.
Come and burn down his damn shit.
Which interestingly enough, is the history of black success in America.
Right.
Your
Wall Street.
Your Black Wall Street. Your Reconstruction era. Your entire. The minute that the cultures thought that black people were getting something that they didn't get, it was destroy it. Destroy whatever it is that every opportunity they have. Even if they had a printing press, destroy that because we don't have a printing press.
Right.
And that's been the history from at least
Day
from
one.
Reconstruction till last week. And to me that's kind of what the problem is that the how do we get to the point to where we get a collective consciousness, or is it necessary to have a collective consciousness, or do we just need, as they say, a few good men and women, I mean it generically, a few good men, because that's the quote, to step forward and say, this is the demand and this is now. Maybe it's done by a lawsuit that uses the kind of strategy that they use in Evansville, where you put all of it on the line and say, this is the connection and this is why this connection has to be paid off.
Well, one of my agencies that I own, we're in this fight about suing the United States government. Mm-hmm. We're in this fight, me personally, about suing the slave owners that participated in the demise of my ancestors. So I believe that we need to take this not only on the local level, the state level, the federal level, but we got to take it internationally to file the same complaint that they did in the Nuremberg trials. Because we have the same, if not more, and more difficult atrocities that took place in this country by the hands of white folks and Native Americans and Hispanics. So most people we only think that white folks did this stuff. It was a lot of people that was involved in this thing.
A lot of people who benefited as well.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm a firm believer. America is the big bully on the block. So if I can convince America to force Africa to pay slave reparation to the descendants of the slaves here, the children of the descendants of the slaves here in this country, I don't have no problem with that. You know, because if Europeans and China is gutting out Africa, why shouldn't we benefit from our ancestors' wealth over there?
Right.
You know, and I believe that we should pit this government against every government that participated in slavery along with America. I don't think America should pay reparation by themselves.
Right.
I think Britain should pay reparation to this country right here only. I'm not talking about what they're doing for them other people. I'm talking about what's happening here. And once we get ours, then we might be able to help somebody else. But let's get ours first.
You know, that's interesting that you should say that. That was one of the strategies used by the Jews, the Jews at the end of World War II.
Right.
They reached out to France, Britain, the European nations, European allies that had fought Germany, to get them on their side for purposes of reparations.
Right.
You know, so they didn't just reach out to Germany or Germany at that time. Then it split up to West Germany and East Germany, and then West Germany became the heavy. But they didn't reach out to just them. They reached out to these allies to say, we need your backing on this. You know, and so they pitted the allies who were actually negotiating their own reparations with Germany, because Germany had bombed France and England and all that kind of stuff.
You see, and white America will benefit. And this is the thing, though. White folks don't think that they're going to benefit from paying reparation. This is a cash cow for you if you actually look at my theory. My theory is we get at these other countries. Say, look, I got a lot of injured people in this country that you helped bring into this country. Now, I'm going to need for you to lower your oil prices. I'm going to need for you to pay some dividends. I'm going to need for you to open up your school system abroad for black folks. And also, just like what I tell people, why haven't Africa put one bank in this country for black folks? Just one. They haven't. And this is the problem. Now, Europe, France can take $500 billion out the country every single year. Why can't the United States tap into France and say, France, you got to give us some of those billions because we need some kind of recovery for the slaves here in America, because you're taking it from that west coast of Africa that is also the descendants' money also. So we can't allow your little self to take all that wealth.
Right.
So now Europe got to say, oh well, are you going to jump on the big guy?
Right.
Are you going to jump on the big guy? No, you're not. You're not going to jump on the big guy. You're going to negotiate. I don't care how much you negotiate, as long as my people are the beneficiary of the negotiation. And that's one way of doing it, but I've never seen America fight a war on our behalf.
Right.
And this is the challenge. Can we get America to fight a physical war, a mental war, a social war on our behalf? And when we're able to do that, then we're going to become one people. And once we become one people, we are untouchable.
Yeah, I agree with the idea that if we ever get to the point that we have even just agree on one aspect of who we are and what we're going to move forward on, we become untouchable. The real tricky part about it is, in my opinion, you tell me what you think, is that when you talk about reparations, when you talk about reparations, it becomes such a hotbed issue, more so in our community than it does in theirs. Their argument is always, who's going to pay for it? This is coming out of my taxes, that. And as you said, what comes out of your taxes is so minuscule, but it would benefit you if black schools were raised to the same level as white schools. It would benefit you because then your child would be getting the benefit of a diversity education as opposed to just a white mindset. And there's nothing like somebody giving you another opinion because they see it from another angle. I mean, that's just the way the world moves forward. You know, I mean, if you look at it from sports to science to engineering to whatever, the minute someone else steps into that particular realm and gives you an alternative way to thinking, boom, the lights begin to go off. Now we're sharing ideas. They only talk economically. Can black people come together behind the idea of reparations and not feel like they're suffering through a Dave Chappelle moment?
Well, can we? That's the question.
Yes.
Will we? Is the problem. You know, because a lot of black folks feel like it's an insult. You know, we are begging. You know, I'm asking for something and I didn't work for it. You know, it's not about me. It's about my ancestors. You know what I'm saying? My ancestors put in work. And you got to think about it. They put in work from sun up to sundown. Then they got raped. Then they got beat. You know what I'm saying? Like the boy from Connecticut said that he plays basketball, and sometimes he goes to bed hungry.
Right.
Now he plays basketball.
Right. At the team that won the national championship that year.
And he goes to bed hungry. Yeah. Now we still having a problem in the NCAA with the women who going to bed hungry. Right. This is still a slave moment in America. And will America come together? We got to find out. Because right now, with black folks coming together, it's going to be really tough as long as we got people out there that's not willing to fight for our cause. And Herschel Walkers of the world and the Oprah Winfreys of the world, these people have platforms to make much more stronger arguments than you and I and my brother out there. You know, we're spending our dollar to be here. These people got tons of money.
Right.
I ain't heard her. Have you ever heard Oprah talk on reparations?
She better not.
Have you ever heard her talk on?
Right.
Have you ever heard Michael Jordan talk on reparations?
Yeah.
And you know, to close my part, and this is a question: do you think Larry Bird would have won a championship without the Chief?
Never.
So what I'm saying to you, they're gonna take both of us.
Yes. Yeah.
They're gonna take both of us. You know, white boy gonna have this, hey, look, we gotta do this together. Or we're gonna be kicking this can down the road for a minute.
The civil rights movement gained its power by virtue of those by the fact that it became obvious to white liberals that they couldn't survive with the America that they knew. Once they saw the dog sicked on kids and hoses, all of a sudden it registered to them why they never noticed it before, that this is what America looks like, especially if you're black. This is what America looked like when they had to stay home during the pandemic and see George Floyd. The same thing, I think, has to happen in order for you to get this side that says reparations. The ability to tap into that particular area that has the privilege and then therefore has, sometimes we have to sidestep the Oprahs of the world. Go to those people who actually have the privilege, who understand, and who understand George Floyd's "I Can't Breathe." So they have to understand the historical nature of George Floyd "I Can't Breathe," because there was a million George Floyds "I Can't Breathe," and that's the part that I think that we have to get to on at this. So now you have your show that comes on that you have your show that comes on every what is it, every Friday?
Every Friday night at 7:00. The Freedom Fighters of the DMV. And also I have a website now, which is the Freedom Fighters of the DMV.com, and we talks about we're gonna bring it live. We're gonna bring everything to you from this show. The platform gonna change a little bit, and I just want to say hello and a shout out to my co-host. She passed, Jeanette Pollard. And you know, she was a beautiful person. She was a warrior, and so we must always reach out to our ancestors. That's the only way that I'm gonna do it. I always say this before I get off in the show. Don't hate me because I love my people. Just know that I do.
Let me just make sure that everybody understands that your original host, Tariq Ibn Jamil Lang, will be back next week. And over the next 5 weeks, in respect of Ramadan, the Cultivating the Culture will be going over the book Reasons for Revelations, which discusses the events that occurred that caused different ayats to be revealed in the Quran. And you wouldn't want to miss it. I mean, sometimes people think you have to be scholarly in Islam, and most times all Allah asks for you is good common sense, your ability to reason. And so therefore, come join the discussion next week and in the next 5 weeks, especially during the month of Ramadan, so that you can have your common sense appealed to, and then you can take that common sense and appeal to some scholars and listen to some scholars, because you'll now have a common sense way of looking at the Quran and at the month of Ramadan. And again, so this has been WBGR Network's Cultivating the Culture. I'd like to say thank you again to Brother Sharif Shafi. You can't get that kind of analysis on these other stations, and you won't. And again, also to Tariq Lang, because you can't get this kind of concern for the community on those other stations. And so we're out until next week. Look forward to seeing you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam. Yeah, bro.
What's up?
I wanted to bring my drum, man, but